The asshole's name was Marco, and he was currently sweating all over my living room floor. My floor. The hand-scraped hickory I'd spent a month sourcing and installing myself. Now it was being desecrated by the squeak of Latin dance shoes and the sheer audacity of my wife. "Are you watching, Liam?" Serena's voice cut through the music. It was a syrupy, sweet sound, the one she used right before she was about to stick the knife in. "My eyes are open, aren't they?" I said to the empty space beside me. My voice was so low I wasn't even sure I'd said it aloud. She was in crimson, a dress that was less fabric and more a collection of strategically placed threats. Marco was in black pants, so tight they must have been painted on, and a shirt unbuttoned just enough to show off the gold medallion nestled in his chest hair. It was all so cliché, it would have been funny if it wasn't happening 5 feet in front of me. They had commandeered the entire living room. My Eames chair, my sanctuary, had been shoved into a corner. In its place, Serena had set up a single leather armchair. For me, the guest of honor at my own execution. "I just want you to appreciate the passion, darling," she'd said, her fingers digging into my shoulder. "The story we're telling." Oh, I was getting the story, loud and clear. It was a story of betrayal, set to a rumba beat. The music pulsed from the Sonos speakers I'd painstakingly calibrated for crisp, architectural sound. Now they were blasting some overwrought guitar track that sounded like a telenovela's entire budget. Marco spun her out, his hand sliding from her waist, down her back, and settling just a little too low. It was technically perfect, I'm sure. A flawless demonstration of how to simulate coitus with a vertical posture. I focused on the details, the architect in me trying to find order in the chaos. The way the light from the track lighting I'd installed hit the sheen of sweat on Marco's neck. The slight tremor in Serena's thigh as he held her in a deep dip, her head thrown back, her expression one of ecstatic surrender. It wasn't for me. None of it was for me. I was just the audience, the ticket holder for a show I never wanted to see. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might be sick. This was worse than finding a text message or a lipstick-stained collar. This was a performance, a deliberate, curated act of psychological warfare. She wasn't just cheating. She was creating art out of it and forcing me to applaud. The song swelled to its crescendo. Marco lifted her, her legs scissoring around his waist in a move that left nothing to the imagination. He held her there for a beat too long, his gaze locked with hers. Then he set her down, and they struck their final pose, him standing behind her, his hand possessively on her stomach, both of them breathing hard, chests heaving. Silence. The song ended. The only sound was their panting and the frantic, pathetic thumping of my own heart. Serena turned her head slowly, a triumphant, cruel smile playing on her lips. She looked directly at me, her eyes gleaming. "Well?" she asked, her voice a breathless purr. "What did you think?" Marco smirked over her shoulder, a look of smug victory on his face. He was the conquering hero, and I was the conquered territory. I opened my mouth, but the words were caught in my throat, tangled up with the humiliation and the rage. I swallowed, the sound echoing in the silent room. "It was," I finally managed, my voice a dry rasp. "Very technical." Serena's smile vanished. She let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like breaking glass. "Technical? That's all you have to say, Liam? My God, you have no soul." She turned away from me, taking Marco's hand. "Come on," she said to him, loud enough for me to hear every word. "Let's get some water. Performing for a statue is exhausting." Their laughter echoed down the hall as they walked towards the kitchen, leaving me alone in the chair, the ghost of their dance still hanging in the air like a toxic fog. I stared at the polished hickory floor. My floor. It looked different now. Violated. Just like me. Later that night, the house was silent. The ghost of the Roomba had dissipated, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. I found Serena in our bedroom, sitting at her vanity, wiping away her makeup as if she were wiping away the whole evening. "We need to talk about what happened," I said, my voice steadier now. I stood in the doorway, unable to fully enter the room. It felt like her territory. She met my eyes in the mirror. "What's there to talk about? I danced. You watched. End of story." "That's not the end of the story, Serena, and you know it. That wasn't a dance. That was a statement." She swiveled on her stool to face me, her face a mask of practiced innocence. "A statement? Oh, Liam, don't be so dramatic. It's art. I thought you, of all people, an architect, would appreciate the form, the lines, the expression." "I appreciate the lines of this house," I shot back, my voice rising. "I don't appreciate you bringing a half-naked man into it to rub himself all over you while I'm forced to watch." "His name is Marco," she snapped. "And you're being ridiculous. You're so hopelessly insecure. Do you have any idea what it's like for me? To have this passion inside me and be married to a man whose greatest thrill is getting a new set of drafting pencils." The dig was so familiar, a well-worn groove in the record of our arguments. My boring hobbies, my quiet nature, my inability to match her dazzling flame. For years, I had believed it. I'd thought I was the problem, the anchor holding her back. "You used to be so much fun, Liam," she'd said a few years ago, after I'd turned down a last-minute trip to Ibiza because of a major project deadline. I remembered the way she'd looked at me, with a mixture of pity and contempt. I'd canceled my plans with a friend to stay home and work on a model of the community center I was designing. A project I was proud of. She called it playing with blocks. "Don't you miss dancing?" I'd asked her, back when we were first married. She'd given up her competitive career, a decision she'd framed as a grand sacrifice for our life together. "I have a new partner now," she'd said, smiling, and for a while I believed my steady rhythm was all she needed. Now her passion had a new partner, a real one. "This isn't about your passion, Serena," I said, my voice low again. "This is about respect." "Respect?" She laughed that brittle laugh again. "You want to talk about respect? How about respecting the sacrifices I've made, or are you forgetting?" And there it was, the ultimate trump card. Her sacrifice. The one she held over my head like a guillotine. Then, a colder memory surfaced, pushing through the fog of the argument. It was from last year, in a stuffy lawyer's office. My grandmother had just passed away, leaving me her entire estate, a portfolio of prime city real estate that had been in our family for generations. I was numb with grief. The lawyer, a man with a face like a dried apple, was explaining the trust I'd set up. Serena had insisted on being a joint beneficiary. "We're a team, darling," she'd purred. The lawyer had droned on about clauses and subsections. "And this final addendum, requested by Mrs. Thorne," he'd said, barely looking up, "stipulates that should the marriage be dissolved due to proven infidelity or documented emotional instability on the part of one beneficiary, the other assumes sole and uncontested control of the trust." At the time, it seemed like a strange, overly dramatic bit of legal jargon. A formality. "Of course," Serena had said, squeezing my hand. "It's about protecting our future. Protecting us." Now, sitting in the silence of our bedroom, the memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. Documented emotional instability. Forcing your husband to watch you perform an erotic dance with another man seemed like a pretty good way to document some emotional instability. The cage wasn't just in my head. It had been meticulously designed, with contracts and clauses for bars, and I was the one who had willingly stepped inside. "You're right," I said, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a chilling clarity. "I forgot." She thought I was conceding the argument. She gave a small, satisfied nod and turned back to her mirror. "Good. I'm glad you see it my way." I saw it her way, all right. I saw the blueprint. And for the first time, I realized I needed to design my own way out. The next few days were a blur of gray. I moved through my house like a ghost, an unwelcome tenant in my own life. The air was thick with Serena's victory. She and Marco practiced constantly, their music a steady, mocking soundtrack to my misery. I'd retreat to my home office, but the muffled throb of the bass would seep through the walls, each beat a little hammer tap against my sanity. I couldn't work. The clean, precise lines of my blueprints mocked me. I was supposed to be designing structures, foundations, things that were meant to last. My own foundation was rubble. One night I couldn't take it anymore. Serena was laughing in the kitchen with Marco, the sound grating on my raw nerves. I grabbed my jacket, walked out the front door, and just started walking. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to move. The polished streets of my neighborhood gave way to the grittier, more chaotic pulse of the city's core. I walked for hours, letting the city noise wash over me, the blare of horns, the chatter of late-night crowds, the distant wail of a siren. It was noise, but it was honest noise. It wasn't the curated, weaponized sound of my home. I turned down a narrow street I'd never seen before, a brick-lined artery veined with graffiti. And then I heard it. It was music, but unlike anything I'd heard before. It wasn't the saccharine pop of Serena's routines. This was complex, mournful, yet driven by a fierce, insistent rhythm. A bandoneon, a violin, a piano, all tangled up in a passionate, desperate conversation. It was coming from below street level, spilling out of a grated basement window. Drawn by a force I didn't understand, I followed the sound. It led me to a heavy, unmarked door. There was no sign, no velvet rope, just the music calling. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the tarnished brass handle. This was not my world. This was messy, unpredictable. It was everything I wasn't. Maybe that's why I opened the door. The air that hit me was warm and thick, smelling of red wine, old wood, and sweat. The room was a cavern, dimly lit by strings of bare Edison bulbs. The brick walls were exposed, the floor a worn, scarred wood that had seen a million steps. It was a world away from the bright, sterile dance studios Serena favored. This place had a soul. The floor was filled with dancers, people of all ages, shapes, and sizes. A young couple, their eyes locked in fierce concentration. An older man, his back ramrod straight, leading a woman with silver hair through a series of intricate steps. They weren't performing. They were communicating. This was tango, raw, immediate, and breathtakingly real. I found a spot near the bar, trying to make myself invisible. I just watched, mesmerized. The dance was a paradox, structured yet improvised, disciplined yet passionate. The lead was clear and strong, but it was a conversation, not a command. The follow was a surrender, but a powerful one. It was everything my marriage was supposed to be and wasn't. "First time?" The voice was smoky and direct. I turned. A woman in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a cascade of dark, curly hair pinned loosely on her head, was looking at me. She was leaning against the bar, a small glass of dark liquid in her hand. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. "You have the look," she said, her lips twitching into a slight smile. A mix of terror and fascination. It's the house specialty. She gestured around the room with her glass. We get a lot of lost souls here. I'm not lost, I said, a little too quickly. Aren't you? She took a sip, her eyes never leaving mine. My name is Elena. I own this beautiful mess. Liam. Well, Liam who is not lost, she said, her tone teasing. What brings you to my basement? The music, I admitted. I was just walking. Ah, the music, she nodded, her expression turning serious. It has a way of finding people who need to hear it. She looked me up and down, a quick, appraising glance. Tango isn't about the steps you see out there. It's not a performance. It's about the story you feel inside. What you can't say with words, you say with your feet. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. What you can't say with words. My entire life was a collection of things I couldn't say. The rage, the humiliation, the grief for a marriage that had become a prison. It was all there, a silent scream trapped in my chest. I left the club that night without saying another word to her, my mind reeling. The music followed me all the way home, its melancholy rhythm a perfect match for the beat of my own fractured heart. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was just curiosity. A few days later, I was back. I stood outside the heavy door for a full 5 minutes, my hand on the handle, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was insane. I was an architect. I designed buildings with right angles and solid foundations. I didn't dance, especially not this. I walked in. The beginner's class was in a smaller room off the main floor. A handful of us stood awkwardly, a collection of mismatched parts. A nervous college student, a middle-aged couple on a date night, and me. Elena was the instructor. Welcome, she said, her voice leaving no room for nonsense. Forget everything you think you know about dancing. Forget the big flashy moves. Today you will learn to walk. And that's what we did. For an entire hour, we just walked. Forward, backward, learning to shift our weight, to feel the floor beneath our feet. Elena would stop me constantly. You're thinking too much, Liam, she'd say, tapping my chest with her finger. The lead doesn't come from your head. It comes from here, from your center. My center felt like a black hole, but I nodded anyway. Your shoulders are up by your ears, she'd correct. Relax. You're preparing for a dance, not a car crash. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. It was agonizing. I was clumsy, stiff, a collection of rigid lines in a world that demanded fluidity. My body, which I had only ever used to sit at a desk or walk from one point to another, was a foreign country. But for that 1 hour, the constant, grinding focus required to simply walk across a room silenced the screaming in my head. I wasn't thinking about Serena. I wasn't thinking about Marco. I was just thinking about my feet. I started going twice a week. It became my secret rebellion. Working late on the Harrison project, I'd text Serena, "Don't wait up." The lie came surprisingly easy. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had her art, her passion project with Marco. Now I had mine. Progress was slow, painfully slow. Learning the embrace, the famous tango hold, was a lesson in trust I was failing spectacularly. You have to connect, Elena said, demonstrating with a partner. It's a frame. Strong, but not rigid. You are not holding her. You are proposing a direction. She chooses to follow. Proposing a direction. My entire marriage was me being given directives. For once, I was supposed to be the one to lead. Slowly, painstakingly, something started to shift. I started sketching again, a habit I'd long since abandoned under Serena's withering scorn. But I wasn't sketching buildings. I was sketching movement, the curve of a dancer's back, the sharp angle of a leg in motion, the space between two bodies in an embrace. I was finding a new language, a new architecture. I was still a terrible dancer, but I was no longer a statue. I was a man learning how to move again. Just as I was starting to feel like I had a small, secret corner of the world that was my own, Serena decided to set it on fire. I came home one evening from working late to find a suitcase in the hall. Not mine, thankfully. It was a sleek, obnoxious leather thing that could only belong to one person. "What's this?" I asked, my voice flat. Serena emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She was glowing. "Good news! Marco's going to be staying with us for a while." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. "He lives across town," I said, stating the obvious. "I know, but the competition is in a few weeks and the commute is just killing him," she explained, as if this were the most reasonable thing in the world. "This way we can practice whenever inspiration strikes. It'll be so much more efficient." Efficient? She was talking about him moving into our guest room like she was optimizing a workflow, the guest room that shared a wall with our bedroom. "No," I said. The word felt strange in my mouth. I so rarely used it with her. Her smile tightened. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no, he's not staying here. This is our home." "Don't be silly, Liam. It's a big house. You'll barely even know he's here," she chirped, already dismissing my objection. "I've already made up the room. It's done." And it was. The decision was made. Marco was now a fixture, a permanent house guest in my personal hell. The next few weeks were torture. The music was constant. Their laughter echoed from rooms I used to consider my own. I'd come home to find them stretching in the living room, their bodies intertwined in ways that made my stomach churn. I felt like a stranger, a boarder in the house I had designed and paid for. Serena was trying to push me out, to make me so uncomfortable in my own skin that I would just break. Then came the night I found the folder. Serena and Marco were out at some dance community gala. The house was blessedly silent. I was in the guest room, Marco's room, looking for a book on architectural history I'd stored in the closet there ages ago. As I pulled a box off the top shelf, I jostled his duffel bag on the floor. It tipped over, spilling its contents. Protein bars, spare socks, a bottle of cologne that smelled of desperation, and a plain manila folder. Normally I would have just stuffed everything back in. I'm not a snooper. But my life wasn't normal anymore. My hand hesitated. Then I picked it up. It wasn't filled with choreography notes. It was filled with printouts, detailed, multi-page reports. The first one was titled, Subject David Miller, Age 45, Occupation Surgeon. It included his financials, his work schedule, his hobbies, and a section at the bottom labeled Vulnerabilities. It listed things like insecure about receding hairline, history of anxiety, and resents wife's success. My blood ran cold. I flipped to the next report. Subject, Richard Chen, age 52, occupation, investment banker. More financials, more intimate, invasive details. Vulnerabilities, gambling addiction, dormant, estranged from son, suspect's wife of infidelity but lacks proof. My heart was hammering. I frantically leafed through the pages. There were 4 more files, all on wealthy, middle-aged men. And then at the very back, I found a much thinner file. Just 2 pages. Subject, Liam Thorne. Age 35. Occupation, architect. It listed my firm, my approximate income. And the vulnerabilities section made me feel sick. Conflict avoidant. Prone to withdrawal under stress. Deeply attached to family legacy, grandmother's property. And a final, chilling note. Target is emotionally isolated, responds to psychological pressure with shutdown rather than confrontation. Prime candidate for provocation leading to instability claim per Clause 12b of joint trust. Clause 12b. It clicked into place with the horrifying certainty of a well-designed lock. Marco wasn't Serena's lover. He was her employee, a professional, a specialist in psychological demolition. She hadn't just stumbled into an affair. She had hired a contractor to systematically dismantle my sanity and trigger the inheritance clause. This wasn't a tragedy. It was a conspiracy. The grief I had been feeling for my dying marriage evaporated, replaced by something else. Something cold, hard, and sharp. It was rage, but it was a clean, architectural rage. The rage of a designer who sees a beautiful structure being undermined by a deliberate, calculated rot. I didn't put the folder back. I took out my phone and, with steady hands, photographed every single page. She hired him. The words hung in the air of Elena's small, cluttered office behind the dance studio. The room smelled of old books and strong coffee. I had the photos on my phone, laid out on her desk like evidence at a crime scene. Elena looked from the phone to my face. Her expression was grim. I knew your wife was a piece of work, Liam. I didn't know she was a monster. She's not a monster, I said, the words tasting like acid. She's a strategist. She found a loophole in our trust and hired an expert to exploit it. So, what are you going to do? Elena asked, her gaze sharp. Go to the police? A lawyer? I have an appointment with my lawyer tomorrow morning, I said. He'll have a field day with this. But that's not enough. I leaned forward. The energy thrumming through me was something I hadn't felt in years. It was purpose. She wanted a performance, Elena. She wanted to put my breakdown on public display. So I'm going to give her a performance. Elena raised an eyebrow. What are you talking about? Her anniversary party. It's in 2 weeks. She's planning it as the grand finale. The night she finally pushes me over the edge in front of all our friends. But she's not going to get the show she's expecting. I looked at her, my plan forming as I spoke. I want to dance. A slow smile spread across Elena's face. Okay, architect, I'm listening. I don't just want to do a few steps. I want to tell the whole damn story. With you. On that dance floor. I started pacing her small office, my hands moving as if I were sketching in the air. We start with me, stiff, controlled, trapped. The way I've been for years. The embrace is a cage. Then, you become the pressure, the torment. The dance becomes chaotic, sharp, a struggle. It's the rumba she made me watch. It's Marco moving in. It's all of it. And how does it end? Elena asked, her eyes gleaming with a conspiratorial light. It ends with me breaking free, I said, stopping in front of her. The music changes. The embrace changes. It becomes a real conversation. It becomes powerful, liberated. It ends with me leading. It ends with me walking away. Elena was silent for a long moment. Then she stood up. All right, Liam Thorne, she said, a fire in her eyes. Let's design a dance. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. I met with my lawyer, who looked at the evidence with a mixture of horror and professional glee. This is airtight, Liam, he'd said. We'll crucify them. But my focus was on the studio. Every night, after another tense day of avoiding Serena and her houseguest, I would go to Elena. We worked relentlessly. We chose the music, Astor Piazzolla's Libertango. The very name felt like a declaration of intent. We choreographed every single step, embedding it with meaning. Elena was relentless, pushing me harder than ever before. No, your shoulders are tense again, she'd command. That's the old Liam. I need the new one. Show me the rage. Show me the freedom. It was the hardest work of my life. It was therapy and Training and battle planning all rolled into one. I was tearing down the old structure of myself and building something new, something stronger, right there on the worn wooden floor of that basement studio. The night of the party, our house was unrecognizable. Caterers bustled, fairy lights twinkled in the garden, and the air hummed with champagne-fueled chatter. It was filled with Serena's people. Wealthy, air-kissing socialites who looked right through me. I was just a piece of the decor, the sad, beige husband to a vibrant, exciting wife. It was perfect. Serena was in her element, floating through the crowd in a silver dress that shimmered like a fish's scales. She and Marco were the stars of the show, of course. Around 10 o'clock, she clinked a glass for attention. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate 10 years with my wonderful husband," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity as she gestured vaguely in my direction. "As many of you know, my greatest passion is dance, and my amazing partner Marco and I would like to perform something special for you tonight." The crowd applauded politely. They performed a dramatic, aggressive paso doble. Serena was the matador, all sharp turns and arrogant command. Marco was the cape, fluid and controlled by her every move. It was a perfect metaphor for her worldview. It was technically brilliant and emotionally bankrupt. The crowd ate it up. When they finished, flushed and triumphant, Serena took the microphone again. This was it. The moment she'd been engineering for a year. "My husband Liam has been so incredibly supportive of my passion," she said, her eyes finding me in the crowd. There was a predatory glint in them. "In fact, he's been taking up a little hobby of his own, a secret one." A murmur went through the guests. "Why don't you show everyone what you've learned, darling? Don't be shy." The silence was electric. Every eye in the room turned to me. They expected me to refuse, to stammer, to make a fool of myself. Marco smirked, crossing his arms. The executioner was ready. I felt a strange, thrilling calm settle over me. I gave a small, calm nod. "I'd love to." A collective gasp went through the room. Serena's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. I walked to the sound system, the crowd parting before me like the Red Sea. I removed her CD, the music cutting off abruptly. I plugged in my phone and selected the track. The mournful, defiant cry of a bandoneon filled the room. "Libertango." I didn't turn to a random guest. I turned and looked toward the back of the room, where Elena was standing quietly by the bar, dressed in a simple, elegant black dress. I had invited her as my plus one. Serena hadn't even noticed her. I walked through the stunned crowd, right up to her. I extended my hand. "Elena?" I asked. She took my hand, her grip firm and steady. I led her to the center of the floor. And we danced. We began as we'd rehearsed. My movements were stiff, my lead rigid. I was the man in the cage. Elena followed perfectly, her body language conveying a subtle resistance, a quiet suffering. The guests were confused, whispering. This wasn't a flashy performance. Then, as the music built, the story shifted. My steps became sharper, more aggressive. I pushed, I pulled, I trapped her in complex holds. I was channeling Marco, Serena, all the pressure and torment. Elena's dance became a struggle for freedom, her movements mirroring the pain and chaos I had felt. The audience fell silent. They weren't just watching steps anymore. They were reading a confession. Then, the final movement of the song began. The crescendo. And I let go. I broke the rigid frame. My lead became fluid, powerful, a true invitation. I spun Elena out, not with force, but with grace. Our dance transformed into a conversation. It was the story of my liberation. Every step was a word, every turn a sentence, every lift a declaration of independence. It wasn't as technically flawless as Serena's dance, but it was real. It was the truest thing I had ever done in my life. The dance ended with me standing tall, my back straight, holding Elena in a final, powerful embrace as the last defiant note of the bandoneon hung in the air. Silence, complete, stunned silence. Then someone started clapping, then another, and another. It wasn't polite applause. It was real. I released Elena, my chest heaving, my body electric. I turned and walked directly to Serena. She was frozen, her face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. Marco looked like he'd been slapped. I leaned in close, my voice a low whisper for only her to hear. I have the folder, Serena. The one on me. And the ones on David Miller and Richard Chen and all the others. The color drained from her face. She finally understood. She hadn't just lost control of the party. She had lost control of everything. I straightened up and walked to the microphone she had left on the table. I picked it up. My hand wasn't even shaking. I looked out at the sea of faces all staring at me as if they'd never truly seen me before. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice clear and strong, carrying through the silent room. "And thank you, Serena, for the final dance." I looked directly at her, a cold, final pity in my eyes. "The performance is over." I set the microphone down, and without looking back, I walked out the front door and into the cool night air, a free man. I didn't go far. I just walked to the end of the block and sat on a bench under a streetlight, breathing in the quiet air. I felt empty. But it was a good emptiness, a clean slate. The chaotic noise that had filled my head for years was gone, replaced by the lingering melody of the tango. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. A text from a friend of a friend who was at the party. "OMG, what just happened?" Another from a cousin. "Liam, are you okay?" I ignored them all. There was only one call I was waiting for. It came the next morning, my lawyer sounding more excited than I'd ever heard him. "Liam, my man! You are a legend!" he crowed into the phone. "My phone has been ringing off the hook. Apparently your dance was the talk of the town." "Forget the dance," I said, smiling for what felt like the first time in years. "Did you serve her?" "Oh, we did better than serve her," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "We served her boy toy Marco, and filed a preliminary injunction against the trust. With the evidence from that folder, the conspiracy charge is a slam dunk. Clause 12B is officially dead in the water. She's not just losing the inheritance, Liam. She's looking at potential fraud charges. She wanted a performance. She's about to give one under oath." I listened as he detailed the legal fallout. Serena's perfect world was imploding. The story, a delicious cocktail of high society scandal, money, and betrayal, was spreading like wildfire. Her carefully constructed facade had been shattered by a single 5-minute dance. She was no longer the tragic artist trapped in a boring marriage. She was a villain, a con artist, and there was nothing she could do to choreograph her way out of it. After the call, I went back to my house. The house, not my home. One last time with a mover. Serena was gone. The place was a tomb. The crimson dress she had worn for that first terrible Roomba was lying in a heap on the bedroom floor. I didn't touch it. I just packed my books, my sketches, and my grandfather's portrait, and left the key on the counter. 6 months later, the city felt like a different place. Or maybe I was just a different man walking through it. The divorce was finalized, a clean, sharp break. The trust was mine, free and clear. I'd sold the house with its polished floors and painful memories to a family with young kids who would hopefully fill it with honest laughter instead of choreographed lies. I didn't move far. I found a loft apartment in the same gritty, vibrant neighborhood as the Tango Club. It was all open space, exposed brick, and huge industrial windows that flooded the room with light. The walls weren't filled with Serena's curated art, but with my own things. My architectural blueprints hung next to charcoal sketches of dancers I'd met at the club. My old Eames chair sat in a corner, bathed in sunlight, finally reclaimed. Elena's club had become my second home. I wasn't a star student, and I never would be, but I was a regular. I was part of the beautiful, messy community of lost souls who had found a home in a basement. I'd even started helping Elena teach the beginner's class, showing newcomers how to take that first, terrifying step. "You're thinking too much," I'd say, tapping them on the chest, echoing the words she had said to me. "It's not in your head. It's here." The story closes on a Tuesday night. I'm in my loft. The sun is setting, casting long, golden shadows across the wide plank floors. There's no party, no audience, just me. Astor Piazzolla's Libertango is playing softly from the speakers. I'm not practicing. I'm not rehearsing for anything. I'm just dancing. By myself. Moving through the open space of my new life, my feet finding the rhythm on the floorboards. The movements are easy now, familiar. It's a quiet conversation with myself. A celebration. Serena had tried to trap me with a dance, to make it a weapon against me. She had succeeded for a while, but she'd made a critical mistake. She'd taught me that a dance could tell a story. She just never imagined I would learn to write my own. The music was finally mine, and I never stopped dancing.